Hey everyone, this is my video lesson for the guitar parts of the song Celebrity Skin by Hole. I'm going to start with a couple of minutes of just talking about the song, but if you look in the description, you'll see the timestamps for the various sections of the song if you want to skip around to the parts you're most interested in. The songwriting credits go to Courtney Love and Eric Erdlinson of Hole, and if you don't know who Eric is, he was the lead and sometimes only guitar player for the band. Also, a credit goes to Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins, and Courtney Love says that he's the one that wrote the main riff. I've done a lot of research for this lesson. I've listened to all the guitar tracks dozens of times, and I've watched and rewatched all the live performances I could find to make sure that everything is being played in the right positions. I even found an interview with the producer Michael Beinhorn where he talks about the recording process and got some insights on how they created the guitar sounds. The whole song is played in standard tuning with two distinct guitar tones. Heavy distortion for the verses, pre-choruses, and the last chord of the choruses, and clean electric for the rest of the choruses. A couple of tone notes. First, mainly in the verses, there is a gated filter effect on top of the distortion guitar parts. You can hear the gate opening and closing at different times, letting the filter effect through. It's sort of a sizzling sound. It's really obvious at the very end of the song when you can hear it winding down. The second one is for the clean sound in the choruses. For the studio version, there are actually 4 distinct parts that Eric recorded. 3 of the parts are played on clean electric through an amp, and the 4th is an unplugged electric that was mic'd in the room. I'll go over all 4 parts in the lesson. Finally, if you're interested in playing a cover version of the song as a solo artist, or if you're the only guitar player in your band, I'll explain how Eric plays it live using a combination of 2 of the 4 parts in the choruses. So that's a bit of background. Let's get to the lesson. This is the verse and main riff of the song. It's only 3 chords, A, C sharp, and F sharp, and you can see the finger positions in the tab on the screen. Each chord gets played 2 times, and it sounds like this. In all, that pattern gets played 4 times per verse. The only variations are adding a couple of extra muted strums transitioning from the C sharp to the F sharp the 3rd and 4th time each verse, and that sounds like this. Also, on the 4th time, he lets the F sharp chord ring out instead of cutting it off very staccato like he does the first times, like this. So the whole verse sounds like this. This is the pre-chorus, and I think of it as divided into 2 parts, so this is what I'm going to call pre-chorus A. Again, it's pretty simple for the chords, just 2 first position chords D and A, and you can see the fingering positions in the tab on the screen. Now what Eric does is add some blues notes into these chords, and he plays those more frequently as the song progresses. On the D chord, he pedals on and off the G note at the 3rd fret of the high E string, which makes it a D sus4, and that sounds like this. On the A chord, he adds the F sharp note at the 4th fret on the D string in that 12-bar blues style, and that sounds like this. So the whole pattern sounds like this. This is the second part of the pre-chorus that I'm going to call pre-chorus B. This is a series of power chords played on the low E, A, and D strings that move up the neck, and you can see the positions in the tab on the screen. It starts on the F sharp of the second fret of the low E string and moves up to the 4th, 5th, and 7th frets. And that sounds like this. Then, from the 7th fret, it moves up chromatically, 1 fret at a time, to the 8th, 9th, and 10th fret, and that sounds like this. Now, when it gets to the 10th fret, it'll change from the power chord to a D7 bar chord, and you can see the fingering for that in the tab on the screen. And the entire pre-chorus B sounds like this. And that is how it sounds for the first pre-chorus. But the pre-chorus gets played 2 more times in the song, and for those 2 times, the second and third times, Eric adds a fill before going to the chorus. This was the fill that was driving me crazy because for the longest time I could not figure out what he was doing. But I finally did. He's sliding up the A string to the F sharp at the 9th fret, and I use my 3rd finger to do that. Then I bar across the D and G strings with my 1st finger at the 7th fret. You can see the positions in the tab on the screen. It then just goes back and forth between those a few times and then slides back down along the A string. Sounds like this. And more slowly. And the whole pre-chorus B with the fill sounds like this. I had mentioned in the introduction that on the studio version there are 4 distinct guitar parts that were recorded for the choruses. I'm about to show you each one, but I want to give you an idea of what the 4 parts sound like when they're mixed together. So I did a quick recording and rough mix, and that sounds like this. As I mentioned, for the studio recording, the chorus is a combination of 4 different parts that are mixed together. This is the first part. It's played on an electric guitar that's running through a clean channel on an amp, and I don't really hear any other effects on it. It starts on an A chord that's played at the 5th fret, and you can see the finger position in the tab on the screen. It then switches to a D chord, also at the 5th fret, and you can see that position in the tab as well. Note that the pinky does come up off the 7th fret of the G string at the end of each time playing the D chord. It switches between those 2 chords 3 times, and the picking strumming pattern sounds like this. After that whole pattern gets played 3 times, it switches to an F sharp sus4 at the 2nd fret, as you can see in the tab on the screen. And at the end of that part, you lift and replace your pinky at the 4th fret on the G string. That sounds like this. So the whole pattern together sounds like this. After you play that whole pattern 3 times, for the 4th and final time, you'll switch back to the distortion sound and just play an F sharp power chord. So for the final time, it sounds like this. As I mentioned, for the studio recording, the chorus is a combination of 4 different parts that are mixed together. This is the second part. It was played on an unplugged electric guitar that was mic'd up in the room. It starts on an A chord that's played at the 5th fret, and you can see the finger position in the tab on the screen. It then switches to a D chord, also at the 5th fret, and you can see that position in the tab as well. It switches between those 2 chords 3 times, and note that the pinky does come up off the 7th fret of the G string at the end of each time playing the D chord. That pattern sounds like this. After that whole pattern gets played 3 times, it switches to an F sharp sus4 at the 2nd fret, as you can see in the tab on the screen. And the pinky does come up off the 4th fret on the G string at the end of that pattern as well. So the whole pattern sounds like this. After you play the whole pattern 3 times, for the 4th and final time, you'll switch back to the distortion sound and just play an F sharp power chord, as I explained in part 1 of the chorus. As I mentioned, for the studio recording, the chorus is a combination of 4 different parts that are mixed together. This is the 3rd part. It's played on an electric guitar that's running through a clean channel on an amp, and I really don't hear any other effects on it. This is the first of 2 arpeggiated parts and is played in the same position as the first 2 chorus parts I went over. The fingering and picking pattern is shown in the tab on the screen, and the playing pattern is the same as the other chorus parts, alternating between the first 2 parts 3 times and then going to the F sharp at the 2nd fret for the final part of that pattern. The whole thing sounds like this. As I mentioned, for the studio recording, the chorus is a combination of 4 different parts that are mixed together. This is the 4th part. It's played on an electric guitar that's running through a clean channel on an amp, and I don't really hear any other effects on it. This is the second of 2 arpeggiated parts and is a high harmony part to the first arpeggiated pattern. It's played up at the 9th fret. The fingering and picking pattern is shown in the tab on the screen, and I'll just note that when he changes between the first 2 chords by adding his pinky at the 12th fret on the D string, it sounds like it is a hammer-on. The playing pattern is the same as the other chorus parts, alternating between the first 2 parts 3 times and then going to the F sharp for the final part of the pattern. You can see the fret positions in the tab on the screen, and I play the F sharp like this, with my first finger across the high E and B strings at the 9th fret, my second finger at the 10th fret on the B string, and then my 3rd and 4th fingers on the 11th fret on the D and G strings. And this part sounds like this. Now, for playing the song live as a solo artist, or if you're the only guitar player in your band, this is what I've been able to piece together. It's not exactly the same every time they play it live, but this seems to be the most common way Eric plays it. He'll start by playing part 4 of the chorus parts I went through. That's the high harmony part at the 9th fret. He plays that through the pattern twice, and once again, that sounds like this. The 3rd time he switches to what is basically the first half of part 1 of the chorus, but with a bit more of a driving strumming pattern. This would be the A and D chords played at the 5th fret, but then he goes back up to the F sharp at the 9th fret for the last part. And that sounds like this. He does that again for the 4th time, but instead of going up to the 9th fret, he switches to the distortion sound and plays a power chord at the 2nd fret for that final F sharp. And that would sound like this. So, those are all the parts of Celebrity Skin. If you like this lesson, please click on the thumbs up button. If you have any requests for other songs you'd like me to try and learn and make a lesson for, please leave those in the comments. And if you found this lesson valuable, I have a link in the description to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can leave me a tip. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I hope that helped you out.